So months ago, when we were planning out our agenda, this panel came up and I was stoked to talk about it. And then I started diving into all these really incredible things that are happening in these three areas and realized under no circumstances could we possibly do any one of these topics justice, let alone all three of them in such a short window, especially when we've got such great people here with us today. So today's panel might look a little bit different in that I'm going to introduce all these people here, give you a little bit of background on what they're doing, and then I kind of want to treat it as if I'm a layman, which I am. I have an English degree. I do not have a neuroscience degree. I do not have any kind of Ph.D. of anything, but I believe in what they're studying, and I want to make it applicable to those of us in the audience who are trying to live healthier and live longer. So let's start with some introductions. Dr. Tyler Panzner here has studied pharmacology, cancer, neuroscience, and inflammation, fueled by his passion on how substances affect the body. Nutrients, vitamins, supplements, foods, and how they intersect or clash with our unique biology continues to be the focus of his work. And then with only over 25 patented ingredients, Shawn Wells here guides us to health with fasting and supplements. Wow, I can't read my own type here. Yes. Conquering personal challenges, his interest spans into psychedelics as well, and his curiosity abounds. Having a proven track record of leading startups and senior leadership roles, Ron DeLever collaborates with scientists and visionaries. His background in economics, athletics, and academia make him a unique leader in his field. And finally, Samina has achieved a biological age of 21. Wowza. I know, right? We're curious about that. At the calendar age of 51, from 13 years, this is what we're talking about, from 13 years of optimizing her health at the nexus of science, technology, and spirituality after surviving a larger than a golf ball brain tumor. By sharing her personal journey and empirical evidence-based protocols, products, and services being developed by the world's most brilliant ethical founders and scientists, she hopes to help others heal chronic illnesses, reverse aging, and reach their fullest potential. So there's a lot happening on this stage, if that is not made clear by all of these wonderful panelists that we have with us. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna dig into this a little bit like a Q&A. I'm gonna ask a question and ask everybody here on the panel to offer their thoughts and their answers based on these questions. Again, attempting to make it as applicable to those of us who are trying to eat healthier, trying to get stronger, trying to live the best life that we can possibly can. Shawn, go for it. I feel like you have a question already. Oh, you're waving. Okay. So each of you are studying some really interesting things in various ways, experiencing them. What are you most excited about as you continue to do the work that you're doing? We can start with you, Shawn.
Right now, for me, is an ingredient that I've patented called paraxanthine. That's a metabolite of caffeine. That's a $1 trillion market. 90% of the planet consumes some form of caffeine daily, but 9 out of 10 people want to consume less. About 60% of us are slow metabolizers of caffeine with the CYP1A2 gene, and this leads to a feeling of anxiety, disrupted sleep, poor HRVs, all the things. For some of us, the half-life is 1.5 hours. For some, 10.5 hours. There's a massive bio-individuality with caffeine. So when he has a coffee and I have a coffee, we're not experiencing the same thing. It can be very different.
Well, I'm slow sip 1A2 as well. So are you slow?
I'm very slow.
Yeah, I'm very slow too. So we might actually feel that the same a little bit.
These people that take caffeine and then say I can go straight to bed, they actually have the fast metabolizer aspect, and they habitualize and adapt very quickly. So it takes more and more and more and more to get the same effects. With the slow metabolizers, we get basically no effect, because a lot of it actually comes from paraxanthine, my metabolite, but we get all the side effects. And that's where I live. Like, even if I had like a Coke Zero at like noon, it's gonna disrupt my sleep. So this is really exciting. We're showing that it has effects on increased glutathione and catalase, increased BDNF for neuroplasticity, increased nitric oxide, increased glutathione and catalase, decreased beta amyloid plaque, so like literally anti-aging to the brain. So it's been very exciting.
That's fantastic. Tyler, tell me about what you're excited for in your field.
Yeah, so me being in the field of genetics, hyper-personalization of genetics, like Shawn mentioned, the CYP1A2 gene, that individual gene can be mutated in up to 30,000 plus areas on that individual gene. So we have the technology to figure out how many mutations you have in that gene, but we don't know. People have not studied what the vast majority of these mutations actually mean. Every mutation you have doesn't actually guarantee it'll change how that protein functions in your cells. So what I've been able to do and what the genetic space is able to do already with this, we know so much less than what we don't know about genetics. So the fact that we're already changing the world, improving people's lives through genetics, while knowing so little, I'm just so intensely excited for as we continue to study more of these mutations, we can figure out, oh, this person has 47 slow mutations, 2 fast ones on that CYP1A2 gene. So what is the net overall effect? It's not just if you have a mutation or not. Every single person in this room has millions upon millions of mutations. It just depends where they're stacked on. Are 10 of them on one gene or 2 of them on a gene? That can dramatically impact how much of a roadblock that is for the blueprint of your body.
I'm going to interject with a quick question. Are you going to be able, I'm assuming the answer is yes, but are you using AI to help you kind of gather all that information and then model it out for everybody? Has that been changing your field as well?
Yes, absolutely. Pros and cons to AI. I think we're all excited for it, but equally as terrified of it. But the fact that you can have, let's just say, 700,000 gene mutations come into play, that's called a polygenic, poly meaning multiple, genic meaning gene risk report, rather than saying I have one gene that makes me not respond as well to gluten, let's say. We can figure out based on 700,000 mutations, again, taking the net overall effect. Some mutations, they make you more tolerable of it versus less. So how do we find where the needle actually lies for you? AI does an amazing job at that. And that's really where the future is going to be. A lot of genetic companies now are, here's a laundry list of dozens of genes that you have it. Just because you have that mutation doesn't mean it actually matters. You can have another one that counteracts that. So the polygenic risk scoring, that's absolutely the future where we can really be precise about whether or not you will get something like an Alzheimer's disease or certain cancer things. It's way more than just one gene.
Wonderful. Amber on, please enlighten us about what you're working on and what you're excited for.
Much simpler. I love it. Something super simple, but it's a yet new discovery, NAD. A few speakers talked about it earlier, last couple of days, but I'm curious, how many of you know about NAD and take NAD precursors? Oh, okay, quite a bit. So yeah, the discovery has been like since 1906, we knew about NAD, but the discovery is like in 2018, we started understanding, oh, we can increase the NAD levels. That has direct relationship to starting with your energy, ATP production. 70% of the NAD turns into ATP. So that is the energy source for everything your body does, like your organs, your organ optimization. And what happens is, as you start aging, your NAD production starts decreasing. So by the time you get to 50, you may be producing half as much as NAD. But what I'm really excited about is just because it's a recent discovery, now we are in an inflection point of understanding all the different benefits. Literally the last few years, like just every
Protects
month.
DNA.
What's that? Protects and repairs DNA. Like it grabs like those broken sequences and puts it back together. I mean, PARP does that, but NAD is the element. If you don't have NAD, PARP cannot put it back together. So, but how does that relate to you is just the manifestation of these benefits are mind-blowing. Energy levels, sure, but like people's blood pressure is coming down. They stop using blood pressure medicine. Like, okay, we don't want to recommend that. But then literally a clinical trial just came out in September showing us that it dramatically reduces blood pressure. Just one little thing like chronic fatigue syndrome. And then there's the synergistic effects where you guys probably will have a lot of experience in. So when you combine it with some other elements that we found out ourselves, the benefits are even like getting much more interesting. Autoimmune disease. People with chronic eczema, 40 years, they cannot get rid of it no matter what they do, completely disappears. So I'm excited about what we're going to see in the next few years, and we are just fortunate to be like in it and trying to lead it, move it forward.
And I'm assuming we're in the infancy of this. It's not like we're coming out with something next year, or about the beginning of the research here?
I think the next 5 years we're going to see so many great discoveries and addressing medical conditions. And it gets tricky because the pharmaceutical company is not trying to own it all. We'll see how that's going to turn out.
That sounds about right. That sounds about right. And Samina, tell us a little bit about where you're coming from, what you're excited about.
So I'm really excited about combining all of your insights because on one hand, you're patenting a caffeine replacement. On the other hand, you're talking about genes and the ability to onboard actionable protocols based on your unique blueprint, and then talking about NAD. Being an investor and constantly traveling, I literally travel with a huge suitcase full of my supplements and food constantly. So earlier this year, I was looking at, I'm like, God, somebody's got to figure this out. How to truly create personalized supplements at scale based on our DNA and our blood biomarkers and any other data inputs you want. Fortunately, I was able to discover a smart factory. So we have the data insights and AI and machine learning to tell us what we should be taking and in what amounts. We don't have actually is a company that has this unique bespoke factory to be able to create truly customized supplements for you as an individual on a quarterly rolling basis. I found that company, super excited about investing $1 million in it. If any of you want to participate, let me know. And it's purely out of my own desire to help myself and then help others, because we need to start by putting the oxygen mask on ourselves. Being 51 years old, I want to be able to maintain this escape velocity, frankly, and also bring products to market that everybody can benefit from as soon as possible. So the future of wellness is personalized. So highly recommend run, don't walk. Get your genetics tested, get your biomarkers tested, get your microbiome tested, and then find out a way to be able to take only the supplements and nutrients and food that are going to help you thrive. Do not be a vegan because you think it's trendy or you want to save animals. I too want to save animals, but because of my genetic mutations, I have to eat choline, which is only animal derived, until we can make bioreactors that can formulate protein at scale. That is coming, for example. So I'm excited about precision wellness, persistent supplementation, using products like yours, we must talk after this, using genetic testing, help scaling that to the public, bringing down the cost so that more people can afford to do it, and then being able to identify ingredients for things like NAD precursors actually are much more effective than taking NAD or using NAD IVs because the molecules are too big and it's only 2 to 5% that you're actually absorbing of NAD if you take the NAD directly. So finding the right combination precisely to your own biomarkers and supporting those companies because they're supporting you.
It feels like, and again, this is my 11th grade science because I'm an English person. It feels as though a lot of this is preventative. If there was access to genetic testing when you reach maturity, then all of a sudden you don't have to redo your diet. You don't have to redo your supplemental regime. You can start fresh. What's holding us back from that shift from symptom management healthcare to preventative healthcare? Understanding that we're all from different countries and different things. I'm Canadian, so it's a little bit different. But I'm just curious, as people that are deeply in the industry, what's holding that shift from preventative to, inverse, from symptom management to preventative medicine? Anybody?
I'll take that first. So one thing I think about being a scientist trying to innovate, what would actually work the best for people? But I realize sometimes I get bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Who's going to foot the bill for that? So I think one of the biggest limiting factors is getting things covered by insurance. But in order to get things, genetic testing justified by insurance, you need to go through so many hurdles, and they need to prove without a shadow of a doubt that that mutation is directly linked to a given disease. And I believe the way that we're fundamentally viewing genetics with disease is inherently flawed at the base level. People try to focus on ApoE4, that's an Alzheimer's gene. Is that linked to Alzheimer's? Absolutely. But the mutations that I look at in my practice, my skin is hardwired to never make enough vitamin D from sunlight alone. I could be in the sun all the time, I will be deficient. And that mutation, 30-40% of the population has that. Mutations like that may kind of not be linked as the Alzheimer's mutation, are linked to Alzheimer's disease progression in humans. So all the attention is on things like ApoE4, or for breast cancer, the BRCA gene mutation. But there's not so much you could do to directly support that specific gene. So my approach is trying to look at all these other controllables and pathways that a lot of us, everyone in the room has these mutations. Just depends, again, how focused they are on things. But trying to tell that to a clinician, it's like, I try to tell my clients to talk to their doctor about it. It's an entirely new language for them. And there's just, the distance is so far for them to say, yes, that vitamin D mutation is indeed linked to your Alzheimer's disease progression. Even though it's in the literature, science moves fast. It also moves incredibly, incredibly slow. So that's the biggest thing from my point of view. And I'm glad that you mentioned as well, making these things accessible, because that's a big issue, is accessibility, especially for genetic testing. You're front loading all this information all at once and trying to be able to disperse that so it's accessible to all, so it can actually help the most people.
Allopathic medicine is capitalistic, and Chris Rock said this years ago in one of his routines. There's no money in the cure. The money's in the comeback. And that big pharma's not a whole lot different than your street drug dealer, you know?
I totally agree. But I'm optimistic. I think we need to demand more. Like, just this question itself is great, so it gives everybody a chance to say something. And now we are seeing the change. One of my friends told me in Switzerland, one insurance company started paying half, I think, the cost of the super nice bike that the people were buying, right? Because you need to bring it back into how to turn it into some sort of motivation, or work with the system. But we all know ourselves that you don't want to spend all your time and money in the hospital. So how do we start? We have to start asking for things. I don't want your sugary snacks out there. Just demanding better foods. I'm just trying to make sure that we are we are talking about supplements here. But it starts with good diet, exercise, the mental health. We all know these things, and we need to demand it, and it changes. I see the change, so I see a bright future.
That's
It's
great.
going to take a minute.
No, that's great. That's great to hear from somebody who's in the fields. It can feel a little bit overwhelming and daunting and scary sometimes going into a massive medical system when I'm not educated. I don't know necessarily what questions to ask, even of my doctor, if I'm feeling a certain way, and feeling unheard. When you're in a doctor's office, I feel this way, well, it has to be this. And it feels like you're just kind of being churned out. And to make it more precise, make it about who I am and my particular genes would likely change how we live our lives if we can catch it earlier, right? We can talk about this younger. If we're not talking about it when we're 50, 60, 70, we're talking about it when we're 15 years old. We're talking about the things that our parents have. Yes, Smina.
So I just want to double click on what you shared with regards to your vitamin D receptor mutations. I have them too. I have 2 of them. So you could test my blood.
You're lucky. I think I have 5 or 6. So yeah, you got off lucky with that one.
But here's the deal, though. Mine was apparently so bad that only 20% of the vitamin D that I would take was absorbed, and it actually led to and precipitated my larger than a golf ball brain tumor indirectly. There's actually about 14,500 pages of diseases and chronic conditions attributable to vitamin D deficiency. And when 40 to 60% of the global population has these mutations related to vitamin D receptors, and you don't know that you have that, you're playing whack-a-mole with symptoms on all sorts of pharmaceuticals and diets and stuff that are never going to cure you because you don't know what the underlying genesis root cause is. So you didn't pay me to say this, but everybody should run out and go test their genetics as soon as possible. The faster you can do that, you can then trace back to the root causes of why you're not reaching your fullest potential. It's not just to treat chronic illness, frankly. It's actually to reach your fullest potential in terms of cognition, focus, sleep, creativity, all of these various ways. And this is not about living forever. This is about reaching your fullest potential, raising your level of consciousness. Because when you can be healthy and then happy and then sane, the level of our consciousness also raises too as a species. In order for us to become more conscientious as a species, we need to raise our consciousness. In order to do that, we need to work on our biology. In order to do that as quickly as possible, it comes down to unpacking your unique blueprint.
I just want to add one more thing along that cure aspect, that there's no money in the cure. Since this is a psychedelic-ish conference, and my friend Dr. Dave Rabin right there is like a brilliant dude. But if you look, I do talks on psychedelic science and then supplements to support them. Look at these studies. There's like 50 to 80% cure rates. And you have to think that frightens Big Pharma. Of course, Big Pharma is coming in with these, we were talking about the psychoplastogens, like where they take kind of the spiritual or woo or kind of journey, like epiphany kind of experience out of these things, but which I think is very important. But these statistics are incredible, that they no longer meet the criteria for depression, for anxiety, for PTSD, cure rates. Like that is an exciting thing, especially when we get labeled often in the medical system to be a diabetic or a cancer patient or depressed. It's like that becomes our identity.
Absolutely. No, that's great. I want to leave some time for maybe some questions from the audience. But first of all, and I'm sure that there's more than one, but if you were to talk to any one of us and say, here's something that from your research, from your work, what's the one thing that we can do applicable to what you're doing to increase our health, increase our longevity, increase our health span, what would you say? What should we all be doing more of, or maybe perhaps less of?
I mean, mindset is first and foremost. Like, I've wrote a whole book on biohacking, but for me, like, I was biohacking because of all my insecurities, trying to push performance more, staying in ultra masculine, showing up with imposter syndrome. How do I push, get like 80 hours, 100 hours? I never had the idea to love myself and grant myself grace. I was gaslighting myself. I was abusing myself because that was my blueprint from being abused. So that's a massive one. If I can just throw a nutrition thing in there, speaking of NAD, is polyphenols. A lot of the blue zones consume high amounts of polyphenols. They inhibit NADase, CD38, the enzyme that breaks down NAD, so there's more circulating NAD. So having things like quercetin in onions and apples, pterostilbene, blueberries, fisetin in strawberries, catechins in chocolate, green tea has EGCG, resveratrol, red wine. These are all amazing polyphenols and will have an effect on longevity. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I mean, probably no surprise the genetics guy is going to say, probably the best thing you could do is get the genetic testing done. And you know, a lot of us have this long biohacking journey trying all these things, but the amount of time and money that you could save by getting crystal clear on not just what your cells need more of genetically, but there's not a lot of conversation about what are they actually sensitive to. Shawn mentioned the polyphenols, which are without a doubt so profoundly helpful for human biology. But for example, a lot of these polyphenols also can block the breakdown of adrenaline. I break down adrenaline 4 times slower than a normal person due to my mutations. Type A, overthinker, but also prone to anxiety. So I notice when I take the concentrated forms of quercetin or luteolin or these types of things, I am an anxious mess all day and can't sleep. And I've seen people that are prone to anxiety that people take these things or recommend them. You'll never see on the bottle for any of these polyphenols that raises adrenaline. People that make them probably don't even know that. So it's like, think about a jigsaw puzzle piece. It needs to fit all 4 sides of the puzzle piece. A lot of times now with supplementation, it's, I need less inflammation or I need lower histamine. Let's throw in that supplement. Quercetin, great for histamine as well. It also can raise adrenaline. It also can pull iron and copper out of the body. So if you're someone that needs to lower your histamine, but you're adrenaline sensitive, like I am, that was a nightmare for me. But, you could figure that out using the genetics. But to what you said, the food sources, I don't think there's much of an issue, but what is a drug by definition? A drug by definition is anything that alters human physiology. So using that rigid pharmacologist definition of a drug, all these supplements we're taking are drugs. And people kind of just can recommend them kind of flippantly or not know exactly everything they're doing. And what can really help one person can really mess someone else up. So you could get crystal clear on which puzzle pieces you need. And again, not that the polyphenol supplements are bad for everybody. I've seen that cause issues for people that they're thinking they're having a bad week. I'm more stressed. Why can't I sleep this week? Something's going on. No, you're taking 5 of these polyphenols in a blend that are very concentrated, way beyond what you would get in food normally, and you have sky-high adrenaline levels throughout the day. So, yeah, the genetic testing.
Yeah, no, that
Conflict of
makes sense.
interest, but yeah, genetic testing.
Wonderful, Baran.
Since you asked specifically about our fields, I will stick to the NAD subject. Be very careful taking NAD through IV. There's not enough clinical studies, but we know that the NAD is very precious to the cell, so the cell doesn't leak it out. So that also means that it doesn't necessarily allow the NAD to come in readily. So when you flood your system with so much NAD, we're not sure what's happening. Maybe your system actually activates to get rid of most of the NAD. Maybe it's a good thing, like fasting. Maybe it's not. We just don't know much about it. So taking precursors seem to be very safe because it's something you're endogenously already producing. So I'm trying to keep it simple.
So to capstone what all of you said, how do you know whether you should be having matcha instead of coffee, blueberries versus quercetin? There's a platform that I recommend that David Sinclair is on the board for. It's called Inside Tracker. Highly recommend signing up for their service. They both provide their own DNA testing and all the tests you'll ever need, or you can take tests from other service providers and upload it into their platform. It tells you specifically what to eat and what not to eat based on your genetics and all of your blood biomarkers. So it eliminates the need for having to make it your full-time job like we have. So faster to market, don't try to figure it out on your own. You'll never be able to figure it out on your own. Leverage the modern technology platforms like Inside Tracker because they've been around the longest. And the reason why I recommend them is they have the biggest data set in the world because they've been doing it the longest. And so you want to go to companies that have very big data sets so that they can extrapolate recommendations based on your unique information. So use a company like that. Then you can take their supplements and upload his DNA test, and then don't take IV NAD.
Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate sharing your knowledge and making it accessible to an English major. I really do appreciate it so much. Thank you again. And yeah, this was great. Appreciate it. Take care.
Round of applause. Yay!